Army of the Dead, new film written, directed and shot by Zack Snyder, is out on Netflix since last weekend, starring Dave Bautista. On paper, the film is notable for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's the first Zack Snyder movie in over a decade now that is an original property and not a comic book adaptation after his work within the DC universe. Secondly, it's the longest ever zombie movie, clocking in at almost 2.5 hours, which is a pretty long time. And finally, 3, it had one of the actors replaced well into the post-production. See, Chris D'Elia had originally been part of the film's cast, and in a large role, no less, and then serious allegations of sexual misconduct against him came to light. He was then cut from the film completely, and his role was reshot with Tig Notaro instead, who filmed almost all of her scenes on green screens and was then digitally inserted into the film. Now, a big question, obviously, was how noticeable this would be, right? And I knew beforehand, so I was actively looking out for it, trying to spot things where it doesn't look right. And if you do that, you can kind of see moments where the editing of the scenes works around it with some cuts done specifically to hide the fact that Notaro is not actually there with the rest of the people. But there's actually also a surprising number of shots with the larger cast present on screen and her being there as well, also in the action sequences. And I have to say, it was in those scenes, it was basically invisible and seamless. Credit to the CG crew, because it really does look convincing, and they managed to pull this off for sure. And I'm pretty sure that if you don't know that Tig Notaro wasn't in the film originally, you would not be able to spot it. Okay, on to the film. The opening sequence shows the original zombie outbreak that, surprise, did not turn into a full-blown apocalypse. It was contained to Las Vegas. And we get this montage of various characters, including Dave Bautista, managing to fight their way out before the city was walled off by the army. Now it's a couple of years later, the city is still closed off, zombies live inside, humans outside. In a couple of days, the US government is supposed to finally drop a nuclear warhead on Vegas to finally get rid of the problem altogether. Bautista is then approached by Hiroyuki Sanada, a powerful businessman who owned one of the Vegas hotels, and he wants to gather a team of mercenaries that will go inside as the army is packing up to leave. They want to infiltrate the city, break into the vault of the hotel, take back all of the money, $200 million, and use the hotel's helicopter to get back out. All before the bomb is dropped, all in the middle of The Walking Dead. Simple, to the point, although there is more to the zombie angle, a twist of sorts, which I will not reveal. In any case, this leads us to a fair amount of action with a fair amount of humor as well. It's also clearly inspired by movies such as Escape from New York, Aliens. I can also see bits of Suicide Squad in it, although this film is certainly much better. So I'll start with the good stuff. Dave Bautista, very enjoyable as the protagonist, and so is the rest of the cast really. They're likable, they have decent chemistry between one another, a bunch of cool people, kind of nice to spend time with them. The central idea is fine because for once it doesn't focus on some hopeless rescue missions or people trying to survive. It's basically a heist film in the movie, heist film in the middle of a zombie movie. At least for a while, until it kind of does steer in the direction of hopeless rescues. The humor is okay, even if it is a bit too crass at times, but still, it did work for me in the context of the film. It also looks very, very pretty. A lot of it was shot with natural light, and it shows the film has an unusually warm color palette for a Zack Snyder film. I like the opening montage, making heavy use of slow motion and being set to a popular song, which fits in with the Snyder style, and say what you will about him, the man knows how to shoot a very good opening sequence. However, on the whole, it's kind of difficult to like the film for several reasons. First of all, the plot is filled with, maybe not nonsense straight up, but with a lot of setups for payoffs that never happen. It's like Snyder became a Chekhov's gun collector, but he never fires any of those guns. I'll give you one example that's not a huge spoiler, I think. When the crew enters the city first, they immediately come across these huge piles of dead bodies, piles upon piles of dead zombies. And the guide who leads them there explains that these are the zombies which were dehydrated by the desert heat and sun. And that whenever it rains, they come back to life for a short time. So you think to yourself, okay, well, the only reason you would ever put that explanation in there is that probably in the third act there will be a storm and these zombies awaken and then they have to fight them. But that never happens. The whole rain thing is just never mentioned again. Another thing that's not really a spoiler, if you're watching closely, you may notice that some of the zombies are actually robots. They have flashing blue eyes, and when killed you can see the metal skulls inside and stuff. And Snyder actually confirmed that they are in fact robots. This is not, something that I made up. And crucially, some of the zombies are robots. Some are regular zombies, but some of them robots. But he offered no further explanation, and it is also never actually mentioned outright or explained in the movie itself. Things like this happen several times, and it makes the script seem very chaotic and all over the place, and also kind of pointless. Now, you're probably going to say, okay, sure, but it's an action film, right? Who cares about the plot details? And true, to an extent, but the action has its own set of problems. The main one being editing and the way that the scenes flow together. Very often I found it kind of confusing. Where exactly are the characters now? What are they doing? Why are they suddenly split into groups? And when did that happen? And then when did they rejoin one another? The way the movie is put together just makes it difficult to get a grasp on what's going on exactly. And the action sequences themselves are not that spectacular either. I mean, in a high-budgeted movie like this, I really expected some truly exciting sequences. That one or two money shots where you just remember it. But it's really all just a bit underwhelming and most importantly, forgettable. I've seen the movie yesterday and it already gets fuzzy in my memory. Like, that there's not a lot of specific scenes that really stand out from it. And then on top of that, you have an attempt to put some emotional drama at the heart of the film with the relationship between Batista and his daughter, as well as him and one of the compatriots. But it's also heavy-handed and clumsy. Like, there's no character development through actions. It's just two characters go off into a corner for a while and have a conversation about their feelings. This is a sign of extremely poor and lazy writing, and I was just rolling my eyes at it. Especially because the dialogue itself is sometimes downright embarrassing. Also, final point, I was not a fan of the way music was used throughout the film. It features a lot of pop songs which are sprinkled in a very heavy-handed way, I have to say, and sometimes one right after another, which almost made me remember Suicide Squad, which was guilty of the same thing. It's kind of like trying to emulate Guardians of the Galaxy, but in the case of both Suicide Squad and Army of the Dead, the result feels much more forced and indelicate and tiring. So overall, I think Army of the Dead ends up being a pretty significant disappointment. On paper, it looked fun and lively, and some aspects of it really are, like the characters and the humor. But the action, the dialogue, the plot, the music, and the plot, which has a cool hook in it that at the end of the day feels kind of unexplored. These things all bring the movie down in a way, which, unfortunate, but it does end up being mediocre and forgettable.